Now, as an example of what we'd like to do in terms of dealing with a system event, let's modify our service to respond to airplane mode. So we'll have our service automatically shut down whenever the user puts their device into airplane mode. Right, so to understand how that works, I'm looking at the documentation for the intent class here, and it defines a string for airplane mode. Right, so this is the action string that's associated with whenever a device is put in airplane mode. If I click on that, it tells me here that, okay, this is the action for a broadcast intent. The actual string behind it is android.intent.action airplane mode. So basically an intent with that action will be sent anytime the device is put into or out of airplane mode. And it tells me here that there's a state extra in there. And if that's true, the device is now in airplane mode. If it's false, it's out of airplane mode. Right, so knowing that, I can now add the code to my service to actually say shut down when we're in airplane mode. Right, now the first thing I need to do, again, is write the broadcast receiver. Right, I can't have my service directly handle it. So I'm going to have to add that receiver to my project. Again, a thing to note is if you're working at home, if you say new, an Android component, if you want to write a broadcast receiver, right, you can just choose it right here from the list. Again, I'm going to write it manually so we can see all the steps involved. So I'm going to go in here and just say new, create a class. I'll just call this guy my service broadcast receiver. Go ahead and create that. Now again, it has to extend broadcast receiver. So I've got that there. I have to override that one method on it, which is the onReceive. Again, and that will this function will be called anytime I receive a broadcast that I'm registered for. Okay, so now when this is called, we have to decide how we're going to actually notify the service. Now we know that in order to create our service, we've got to do something, right? We could, again, define a bunch more action strings for it, but we also know the easiest way for my service is to say, I'm going to create an intent for my service intent. And when I create it, I want to actually just pass in the class for my service. Okay, now that will go ahead and create an intent so that I can go to my service now and just say, context, start service, and I can pass in that service intent. The problem, of course, is that my service won't have any way of knowing this intent from any other intent, right? So I need to somehow let the service know that this is actually an intent that's being sent because of a change in airplane mode, right? So what I can do here is I can say, well, you know what? Let me go ahead and get the action. So we'll call this our broadcast action. And I'll just take the intent that's been sent to me, and I'll call get action on it. Right, that'll get the action string for it. And we know that for airplane mode, there's also a state extra in there, which is a Boolean. Remember, the name according to the documentation was state. And I also have to give it a default value for those. Right, well, I don't want to default to true because true means I'm definitely going to airplane mode, so I'll default to false. So that if for some reason it wasn't there, I'll just set it to false, the same as if I wasn't going into airplane mode. Right, so now that I know those two things, probably the easiest thing for me to do is take the service intent that I've created and actually set those as extras. Right, so I can do a put extra, and maybe I'll put an extra on here called broadcast action. And that'll be the action I received from the broadcast. And I'll put another extra on here for the state. So basically all I'm doing is kind of replaying the information that I received from the broadcast event and sending it to my service. So that when I get to my service, it'll have these fields to check to know whether it's a special broadcast that it's receiving or if it's a regular service intent. Now remember that one of the key things we want to do is modify our manifest so that this instance, this class here, service broadcast receiver, will actually receive notifications of going into airplane mode. All right, so I'm here in my manifest. So remember I said that we have to create a receiver tag. We have to give it the name. The name will be our broadcast receiver. We put that guy there. All right, so this is the entry for that broadcast receiver. Okay, we want it to receive all the broadcasts with the action for airplane mode. Right, so I create an intent filter. I want to put an action test on it. Right now I just have to give it the name. Remember we looked at our documentation. If I just flip back here real quick, it said the string value for that was right here. So I can switch back to my app, paste that in. All right, so now that will take care of calling my instance of my class air service broadcast receiver anytime a broadcast is sent with that action string. So the only thing I have to deal with now, right, is that remember that when my broadcast goes ahead and calls start service, it's going to put these extras on there. So inside my service, I just need to look for those extras. And so inside of here, right, in my on start command, because that gets called anytime start service is called, what I'll do here is just have a string. It'll be my intent action. And I'll ask the intent to get extra. All right, remember that was our broadcast action, we called that. So what I want to do here now is say, well, if intent action is not equal to null, in other words, it actually has something in it, and intent action equals, and I want to pass in that string value again, right? So remember that I actually passed from my broadcast receiver, right, the exact action that was there. So again, I'll go back to this, copy that again, and basically test it to see if it's that string value. Right, so that tells me that when that happens, that this intent was actually sent because I received that airplane mode. Right, so what I want to do now is that it definitely was an airplane mode broadcast. Now what I want to find out though is was it actually going into airplane mode or out of airplane mode. So again, I'll have the state here. I'll go to my intent. Right, I'll get Boolean extra. Remember the name for it was state. Again, we'll default that to false because it's only true if we're actually specifically going into airplane mode. So then we can say, well, if state, in other words, we know we're definitely going into airplane mode, well then maybe what we might want to do is just go ahead and stop self. Maybe we want to go ahead and shut down because we know we're going into airplane mode. Now if anything other than that was true, well then we're going to consider this just a regular intent. Right, so I can take my normal behavior of setting up the runnable and passing the work off. Right, so it's really that straightforward, is that basically I just had to create the broadcast receiver to act as a proxy for my service, and then just have it call my service with the start service, passing in the information necessary to know what happened. Alright, so we now have our program running in the emulator. Now what I've done as well is I've put a breakpoint in my broadcast receiver and in our onStart command. And so let's go ahead and first, let's launch our service here. And of course, I'm initially going to hit this breakpoint because I'm starting my service, but let's just let that one fly. Back to our emulator. Now we're processing as we normally do. So now we're here. Let's go ahead and put our emulator into airplane mode. So I'll go to Home. Bring up my programs. Get down here to Settings. Choose Wireless Networks. And now as soon as I hit airplane mode, switch into my source code, you see if it's a breakpoint in my broadcast receiver. Let's release that. And then I hit my breakpoint and onStart command. If I step through here, get my intent action. Notice my intent action is the airplane mode. Step through there. I go ahead and get my state. I check on the state, which because it's true, I'm going to go ahead and stop self. So you see I was there very easily able to go ahead and stop my service based on the fact that the device went into airplane mode. And again, that same technique works with any of the many different device broadcast events that we can track.